Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin of Collecting Japanese Prints. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together and discuss Japanese prints, paintings, history, and culture. We are in full swing here in the summer in Chicago, and it's actually kind of nice. I've been able to meet with several collectors and clients over the last couple of weeks, a few more coming in. I've just started, well, a few weeks ago, I uploaded an exhibition of masterworks from all genres. If you haven't had a chance, I invite you to have a look at collectingjapaneseprints.com. And that has sort of inspired some people to pay me a visit. I've had several collectors from out of town come by and say hello and have a look. So I'm always welcome. I always welcome clients and collectors to come and pay me a visit. So it's just something that that's available. So, but of course, all of the artwork is online, and so if you're interested in looking at some fantastic pieces from all genres of Japanese prints and paintings, please have a look at my website. But for today, we're going to discuss an artist. He's a contemporary print artist. He's actually passed, but his roots are in Sosaku Hanga, and so I'd like to discuss the work of Hideo Hagiwara today. And I pulled out three really great examples of his work from different stages, so that you could kind of see how his body of work evolved over time. And so, without further ado, let's go to the table and have a look. So I put out three works. I just want to pan out so you could see that they're sort of laying there on the side on the table. But I'll start with one of his earlier works, and also let me start with a little bit of his biography. So today, as I said, we're discussing Hideo Hagiwara, and he was born in 1913. He passed away in 2007, so not too long ago. And, Hideo Hagiwara's career is actually kind of fascinating. He studied art and studied oil painting like many of the Sosaku Hanga artists. And then when he graduated from art school, he also had some training in woodblock carving. And when he graduated, he actually worked for Takamizawa, who was a publisher of woodblock prints, but basically he specialized in reproductions of ukiyo-e prints like Hokusai's Great Wave, Hiroshige's designs, and so they were just producing reproductions for tourists, and so that's the word I was looking for. And so basically, the Takamizawa's studio was primarily focused on tourist trade artwork. And so Hagiwara, basically, his job was to create prints, copies of older Edo period prints to be reproduced into newer copies for commercial purposes. And, but he did that for a while, and then he was drafted into the war, into the army, I believe. And so he was drafted in 1945. And then he basically got sick, and he got TB, and I think that's what saved his life, quite frankly. And he was recovering from that for a bit of time, actually. And then in that time, he picked up oil painting and became interested in prints as well. And he started making his own artwork. And so this particular print that we have here is a figurative work. It's representational. And so it's a landscape, actually, not a figure, but it's a landscape that's done very loosely, kind of almost, it reminds me almost, designs by, forget the artist's name, Minami, who did children's sort of inspired images. It has a very playful, very almost naive quality to it. And this work was done in the early 50s. It also reminds me, by the way, of Rothko's really early work. which is fascinating because when we look at his later work, we could also see connections to the American abstract artists working at the same time. And so this design, you can see it's signed in his signature in pencil Hideo, and it's numbered 7 out of 30. It's not dated, but if you have the reference books, and I have a few to show you, this one's from the, I think, mid to early 50s. And so I also want to pull it out from the table so you could see that it's this white sheet of paper is just a folder that it's in, and you can see the entire sheet. So it's really cool design, very rare. His early work, you just don't see it for sale. It rarely comes up, and so this is a really nice example of his early work. Now, as his career took off, he actually found inspiration in abstraction. And this work from 1959, so this design basically dates about 4 years after this work. And this design really is striking, and I'm going to angle it so that the light doesn't create such a glare. And we could see the wonderful wood grain in the image. It's very indicative of a mid-century modern style work of art where the emphasis is on the production means. So you can see the wood grain that produced the design, and and you see that style in a lot of artists' work around the world, really, but in particular, you see this wood grain in Saito's work and in Genya Maguchi. So, very much an artist of his time. This design is called Midday. We see that here. And dated 1959. This impression happens to be a rare AP or artist proof. And so what we have here is a collection of different blocks of wood that have been inked and impressed into the paper with different colors to create this striking effect. And Hagiwara produced a design of day, or daybreak, I believe, and then a midnight. So it was a series of times of day, I guess you could call that, a series on the day. But yeah, this one's called Midday, and I just find this really striking. It's also printed with a sort of silver metallic pigment that gives this really wonderful sheen. You're probably seeing, I'm going to back up so you could see there's a light above my table. And so the print is really picking up the light. So yeah, it's a really neat design. I'll focus on each work towards the end, but I just wanted to sort of go through the lineup so you could see everything. So this design is called A Floating Weed, and it's from 1965. So this work is basically 10 years, or a little bit older than this work. So this dates to about 1953. You could see his progression as an artist, and this design is not as focused on the wood grain as much as it is focused on an abstract composition with color and circular forms. Hi Ron. Yeah, the wood grain on this print is quite stunning. Sorry, going. I just want to say hello to everyone that's joined live on the chat today. So this design is really focused on the composition based on color and where each figure or the circular forms are on this this composition. It's really cool. So you could sort of see these as, he calls these a floating weed is the title. So you could sort of maybe kind of conceptually think of a space where these weeds are sort of floating in the air, and it might be dandelion, or it might be other florals, or even just pieces of other weeds that are just being moved into the air. It's pretty cool. I love this black line that comes across. It's very organic. It kind of suggests the horizon line for me in some ways. And this, it also kind of has a conversation about what is sky and the land, maybe a reflection or water. But really, that's not really there. That's just me adding that. Those elements, this element is actually true abstraction, so it could be really much anything. The other thing I want to point out, because Hagiwara was really good at this, this particular design, let me see if the other one has it. This may not have it. Well, there's certain designs, which these are not examples of, where he would print from the back. And, with all of these prints, the wood blocks are impressed onto the front of the paper. However, there are some examples where he would print from the verso and the color would bleed through to create some really interesting effects. And so I'm sorry I didn't pull one with those effects, but he was an interesting artist because he experimented with his printmaking and created a lot of really wonderful effects that echoed oil painting. And so when you look at his prints, it's not just the design, what you're getting, you're also getting a sense of texture and the surface of the paper, which is a very important aspect of oil painting at this time. And it's very hard to create a sense of surface onto a printed medium. So, I just want to sort of show you again the wonderful surface on these designs. And so, as a Sosaku Hanga artist, Hideo Hagiwara carved his own blocks, printed his own prints, and so all of his artwork was self-directed. He wasn't, as far as I know, that involved in Onshi's circle. I'm sure he was aware of Onshi's work as an artist who was interested in abstraction. He basically carried on the torch that Onshi carried for so many years and was able to produce abstraction successfully because of Onshi's previous efforts. And so I'm not sure how involved he was in Onshi's circle. He probably wasn't that involved, considering that he was drafted into the military and sick and recovering. But certainly after that, and he started working, I'm sure their paths would have crossed. But I will say that Hagiwara's designs are really uniquely his own voice. Often what you might come across in post-war prints, a lot of them are influenced by Onshi because he was such an important figure and so charismatic. And Hagiwara really found his own voice in making these designs. And really, they echo more about mid-20th century artistic trends in painting than in printmaking, which is neat because you really see the artist looking beyond the confines of his own print colleagues or even in the genre he's working on, and he's looking beyond that. He's looking well beyond Japan's shores into sort of the international sort of environment of art at the time. So as things go, his work is very much caught in the conversation of that mid-20th century artwork, which is, I think, important, but also an opportunity for collectors, because if you're interested in mid-20th century painting, those paintings are going for half a million to millions of dollars and more, especially if we think of Rothko. But as a collector, you could acquire really striking mid-20th century designs by a master for a couple $1,000s. And so this work will be on my website. It's not on my website. And this one, I believe, is sold. But the point is, you could find these available for a lot less than you could, say, a painting by an American artist. And these artists were very much participating in the same conversation. So, all right, I've spoken quite a bit. I'm just going to bring the phone closer so I could zoom in and you can have a look at the prints. Let's see if I can angle this again so you could see the surface. And of course, this last work. Ron just mentioned that this design gives the impression of the cosmos, and I would agree with that. It really has a striking sort of celestial sort of quality to it. The surface really suggests, I mean, I've never been to space, how many of us have, but it certainly suggests something in space. The way that the light sort of shines through the plane of the design. Really luminous. Quite frankly, it's really striking, and I'm afraid that it's hard to capture on the phone. You know, I'm doing my best, and generally speaking, prints obviously show so much better in person. But yeah, you know, it's still based on what I'm looking at on my phone. It's quite striking, and this design is such a wonderful design. It's just the composition is really tight. That sort of organic element that is going across the design is really well placed there. I mean, the draftsmanship of the composition is like excellent. I mean, it's as good as anything Onji produced, in my opinion. So one last time, just sort of an overview. I should also point out that Hagiwara did not stay with abstraction. He went on and produced a series of 36 views of Mount Fuji later in his career. And, so it's interesting. He was such a varied artist in terms of his body of work, was very able to produce a diverse body of work in such great quality that it means he's a great artist. And I'm afraid he gets overlooked quite a bit because he matured right at the end of the Sosaku-hanga movement, and really he hit his stride post Sosaku-hanga when really prints became an international sort of phenomenon in Japan. And I think he got lost in that transition. And so he's important. He's an important artist that I think worth looking at, certainly. And I want to point out some reference books. I always like to showcase books that feature the artist that we're discussing. So we have a wonderful sort of hardcover reference in this really wonderful box. I won't pull it out, but this showcases a lot of his abstract designs. As this book, this is a soft cover design also featuring his abstract designs. And there's there's actually several 2-volume sets that highlight his entire body of work. I wouldn't call these a complete catalog raisonné, partly because, they're missing things. But for example, that's very much in the style of this landscape here, this floral. Here's a portrait of Christ, And then he gets into the sort of, he did a series of designs inspired by mythology, and that's what these are. And then, of course, these are the abstracts. And so just kind of gives you a sense of his body of work. Now, perhaps, I don't know if this book ends with his... No, this book is going to show just his abstractions. But as I said, I would say in the late 80s and so on, he started doing more representational work. And he passed away in 2007. And as far as I can tell, he was working in the late 90s to maybe 2000-ish. So, he was very active, left a large body of work. So, he's definitely worth looking up. And if collectors are interested in mid-20th century design, his work is fantastic. You may not be familiar with Hagiwara, and if you're not, remedy that problem by looking him up. Certainly I have some information up on my site. I currently have, and I should have brought it for our talk today. I don't have it on the table, but I have a watercolor by Hagiwara, and it's inspired by Emile Nodi's watercolors. So, I think it's a fantastic work as well. And I'll probably link a picture below in the conversation here so you can have a look on what it looks like. But generally speaking, he was an adept at painting, watercolor, and certainly woodblock prints. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me. I want to acknowledge that these videos are now on YouTube, and a lot of people are starting to watch them as I archive them. So if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome. And they're primarily produced live on Facebook, and so this is why they're not edited, and they're pretty much off the cuff, the way things are happening the way they're happening. So so that's why I've been asked about that by some people who started watching them on YouTube. So, but anyway, all of my videos are archived. As I said, they're on my website on collectingjapaneseprints.com. Go to Woodblock Wednesday and you could check them all out. I think we're up to about 80 videos, so that's quite a substantial library of just a lot of videos on topics relating to Japanese prints, paintings, and all kinds of things. So I invite all of you to have a look. And again, my website has tons of material, reference books available for sale, as well as woodblock prints and paintings, collectingjapaneseprints.com. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about something else that is exciting and interesting. So until then, thank you for joining us.